How long have you lived here?
About a year.
Oh, so you know him pretty well.
Well enough.
Because, I'm just wondering about the house, how he came to live here. I'm guessing it belonged
To his parents? Why don't you ask him yourself? He's usually in the library at this time of night, and I'm pretty sure he'll be less desperate for the lavatory than I am right now.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Haunting the Narrative. Today, we are here to discuss a very special topic, and I am joined by
Natasha.
Yes, so it is a Meg and Natasha special to discuss a topic that has been on our minds since the very beginning, and that topic is haunting the narrative. And by that, we mean not just the name of our podcast, but the literary idea of what it means to haunt the narrative. And this is a concept that's really core to Lockwood Co, which is part of the reason we named our podcast after it. And we're finally here, 18 episodes in, to dive into it. Took us long enough, but we're getting there. So we are going to start out by defining our terms and giving you some definitions of what we mean by haunting the narrative. And then we're going to jump into some of the places where this concept manifests in Lockwood Co. To haunt the narrative means that a character or multiple characters, even if they're not physically present or even dead, they profoundly affect the story's development and themes even after their influence has ended. So their actions, choices, or absence continue to ripple through the plot and impact the characters. They usually have a very sparse presence in the narrative, but they have a major impact. But they do not have to be dead. That is not a requirement. And one good example of this that we see in Lockwood & Co., like a very small example, is at the beginning of The Creeping Shadow. Lucy is not interacting with Lockwood at all, but he is haunting the narrative. She sees him everywhere. She's thinking about him all the time. He is haunting her experience in those early chapters, even though he is not physically
He's
present.
very much sort of haunting her actions as well, because she's looking at like Emma March and retreat along the secret corridor and going, what would Lockwood do? I'm going to go after her. Sometimes you have to be a bit reckless. I learned that from someone. But I'm using this trick that someone taught me.
Yeah. So that's a kind of good like micro example of someone haunting the narrative. And the other important point to make is that just because someone is dead, that does not mean that they are haunting the narrative. For example, Skull is dead, but he is not haunting the narrative. He is a present character.
He's going to be haunting the narrative in book 6.
Yeah. Oh, probably. Oh, Skull. That's so true.
That's the one where Lucy and Lockwood break up because Lucy can't get over her dead boyfriend.
Oh my gosh. We can't go into that too far today, because otherwise this will turn into the Lockwood, Lucy, Skull love triangle episode.
We have to talk about Skull before we can do that. That's in the works.
Yes. We have had many requests for that, and we hear you. But yes. So that's kind of a brief outline of what it means to haunt the narrative. And then we're going to dive into a lot of examples of that. But before we get into the Lockwood Co. examples, I think Nat has some examples we can talk about in other media.
I have a few, because I think it's sometimes easier to learn when you can draw that comparison with other pieces of media that you might be more familiar with. So one is our problematic king, Harry Potter. To be honest, Harry Potter's not super problematic. It's the author.
Exactly. It's not the character. It's the author.
Yeah, sometimes you just think, did you ever read your damn books, woman? Like, what? Shut up. Anyway, Harry Potter, obviously, the obvious one is James and Lily Potter are haunting his narrative. He's constantly trying to live up to his father's legacy.
It's a good example, too, because there's so many examples in children's literature in particular of people who are orphans and then their parents haunt the narrative.
They're always trying to live up to their father's legacy or their mother's legacy, or, there's always like the daughter's wearing her mother's dress, or always. Can I think of any examples right now? No. Sorry. Moving on.
I mean, most Disney movies, let's be real. Most Disney movies. So
Voldemort sort of haunts the narrative in Harry Potter as well. Like the spectre of him, doesn't he?
Yeah,
People
especially early on.
Say his name.
And we don't see him appear on the page till the very end of the first book. And it's a brief appearance.
Another
too.
example that's put down in this little list is the Ring and Sauron in Lord of the Rings. Can you separate those things? No.
I don't think
But
so.
also, are they really haunting the narrative? I think they're directly manipulating the narrative from the shadows, which is different. If you're haunting the narrative, your impact is over your influence emotionally on the characters who are actually directing and creating the narrative. You don't have your fingers in the pie. You're not sending out armies and Nazguls and things to like shift the heroes where you want them to be.
Well, I think the point, though, about that is that we never see him really appear on the page besides, like, we have that brief interaction with him, like, through the Palantir, but, like, he's not he's not a character anyone's walking around and having conversations
Okay,
with.
but like Donald Trump has never walked into your house and said, "Hi, Megan, you're going to be doing this," and yet he is
Thank God.
influencing your life quite a bit.
Okay, I can't bring that man into this podcast. I can't.
But you
But
know what I mean? Like, he's an active player in the narrative. He's a puppet master. He's behind the scenes, but we know he's there. If he was haunting the narrative, it would be more like the fear of him, even though he's not doing anything. He's not actively doing anything, but the fear of him is influencing the actions of our protagonists. That would be Sauron haunting the narrative. But they have a very real fear of him hunting them down because he's trying to hunt them down.
Yeah, he wants the
he's
ring.
not really doing a good job of haunting them, I don't think. Game of Thrones is another one, which this is a really fun one. If you want to look up Game of Thrones, who haunts the narrative, you're going to get 5 million different answers. Meg has never read Game of Thrones. I read all of them.
All the published ones.
All the
'cause
published
it's not
ones.
finished.
It's never going to be finished.
It's not.
It's not. And I am so annoyed about that. It's like people online are all like, you can't get angry. He doesn't owe you a book. He's made millions off it. Yes, he does. I'm sorry. He's a professional writer. You know what? I don't finish my fics. That's fine. I'm a hobby writer. I'm doing it for fun. I'm gifting you my free time. I'm sharing my enjoyment with you. If I don't finish it, it's fine. Okay, you're valid to be annoyed at me, but it's fine. If I am going to stand up in front of people and say I'm a professional writer, respect me as a professional writer, please. And then I don't finish what I start despite being paid for it. I'm just like, look, I have written and would you like some? Maybe that could help you solve the problem. Anyway, the rest of it's probably never going to be done. But they are very good books. I actually really like them. They are brilliant books.
I believe that.
There's so much
I believe
politics.
that.
Who haunts the narrative? It's hard to say because so many of them are dead or dying. The Mad King, I think, would be my thing because he's not alive at any point in the series. He died decades before, 10, 20, maybe 30 years before the series actually starts. But his legacy has got a lasting impact on it. His daughter is the one who everyone's running about naming their kids after, the Khaleesi.
Okay, I do know
There
that
we
name.
go. She's trying to live up to her father's legacy and the dragons and all of this. Lyanna Stark is another one who I would say haunts the narrative. With her past relationships, the mystery surrounding her. Her brother did an awful lot in her memory. And a lot of his choices and actions set up the dominoes for problems and successes further down the line. So I would say that she somewhat haunts the narrative. The last one we have on our list was put here by Mairead, and it is the wife in Jane Eyre?
Jane Eyre.
Jane Eyre?
Jane
I'm
Eyre.
saying Eyre. Sorry, I don't like it here.
We'll let that slide, which Nat's never read this, but I have. Spoiler warning if you have not read this classic work of literature, but basically we find out at the end the male main character of the book has been keeping his wife locked up
Like
in
a
the
reverse
attic. I don't understand that reference, but I believe you.
Okay. Editor's note adding in here. Most of this conversation is being muted because I mentioned somebody who committed a very horrific crime. We really don't want that name in our podcast. But it's kind of important that you know that I was recording this episode running on 4 hours sleep.
But the other example from classic literature, I've not read this one, but I've heard this from several people, that the wife in Rebecca is also a good example of someone who haunts the
Rebecca
narrative.
is the person who kind of tries to turn herself into her husband's former wife, right? Because she passed away.
Exactly. And famously, if you're me, also inspired the Taylor Swift song Tolerate It. So there you go.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah. So fun fact. That is everything I know about Rebecca. Someday I'll actually read it.
All of the important stuff. Yeah.
But now we're going to go back to Lockwood Co.
Woo!
As I mentioned at the top, we're going to go through a couple of different hauntings today. And we're going to go through when we first encounter them in canon, what the backstory and background is for these hauntings, how our characters are impacted by them, and if these hauntings are ever resolved in the narrative. And if we're going to talk about haunting the narrative in Lockwood & Co., there's nowhere else we could start but with one Jessica Lockwood.
So, Jessica Lockwood, we all know that she is Lockwood's sister. What I find really interesting, like on a practical note, is that her death pushes Lockwood into agency work. Without Jessica, Lockwood & Co. wouldn't exist. Well, what I mean to say is without Jessica dying. If she was alive, he wouldn't be an agent because Lucy started training at 8. Here we go, timeline talk. Mairead's not here to murder me. But Lucy started training at 8. She notes Fitz trainees are 7. Lockwood talks about how he was impressed by the Fitz agents and their silver jackets, things like that. And, you know, he's got stars in his eyes for all the big prestigious things, doesn't he? And yet somehow
Always.
he ends up apprenticed to some maverick independent operator who's a gravedigger. This makes it seem like, you know, it's because 9 was too old. 9 was too old. If he was going to go into agency work, it would have been 8 or 7. And he wasn't because she wouldn't let him. So the only reason Lockwood is an agent is because she died. If she was alive, he would be, he'd be in school. He'd probably be doing odd jobs for money to, you know, help pay the bills and whatnot because it's 2 kids trying to get by in the world. George, well, there's no Lockwood & Co, so I guess Lockwood's not an agent. George and Lockwood don't meet. George ends up at Tendies or some small agent outfit. And I guess Lucy ends up in Night Watch.
Yeah, it would have changed the trajectory of everyone in this series in many ways. And the other important thing I think about Jessica's death is not only would Lockwood not have become an agent for practical reasons, he also wouldn't have felt that strong internal drive in the same way to want to, you know, take visitors out of the world. Like he wants to save other people from the same fate that he
We
had.
see that a lot in him, don't we? Like in The Hollow Boy at the beginning, he's always going around with all the ordinary people in Whitechapel. And, you know, they're doing very, very, very small jobs for people who probably can't afford to really pay much, but they're doing the jobs anyway. He doesn't turn anybody down. They don't turn a single case down until Holly starts turning people down for them. You know? And he mentions he found Harry Crisp because he was patrolling and tooting.
Yeah, he has this vendetta against visitors that Lucy, you know, calls out where he can't even consider them, you know, as human the way she does, which in some ways is not a bad thing. But it's because of his own trauma and his own experience with visitors because of
Very
Jessica.
much. What's very interesting with Jessica's death as well is like her closed door is kind of a symbol of Lockwood's closed emotions, isn't it? He keeps everything locked away in there, all of his past. Well, I mean, his personal past, obviously, but I'm thinking more like his past feelings, his past loves, his loves for his parents, his love for his sisters, all of the memories wrapped up in that bubble of family and warmth and belonging. He shoves it all in a room and he shuts the door and never opens it. And he spends most of the books trying to keep all of his feelings for his friends, all of his feelings for Lucy. He tries to keep them all shoved in a little box, shut the door, never open them.
Exactly. And, you know, the other important part about Jessica's room is not only does it hold all of these feelings of Lockwood and all of these, you know, physical belongings of his, it also has her death glow. It's her true presence still lingering in the house, which obviously becomes very important later on in the series.
So she is a really fun one, isn't she? Because she haunts the narrative, but she's also literally haunting the house.
Yes. It is. I love that so much. And I mean, that's why she's, you know, the biggest example of this concept in the series.
More of the physical things, which is just kind of a little aside, is kind of like Lucy's in the attic room because she's got that death glow downstairs. You know, otherwise she would have a nice big bedroom like Lockwood and George. Instead, she's shoved up in the servants' quarters upstairs. Because...
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't sleep in the death glow.
No. Aside from the physical ways that Lucy sees Jessica haunting the narrative, she also kind of haunts Lucy in the first 2 books because she's a complete mystery. Lucy has no idea why that room is locked off. She has no idea why that door is closed. And as soon as she finds out that Jessica exists, she wants to know everything about her, how she's influenced Lockwood. She really adds to that air of mystery that Lockwood possesses that Lucy loves so much, as George calls her out on and
She's haunting the house, she's haunting Lockwood, isn't she? More than
Yes,
anything
she
else.
truly is.
I think, Lockwood's one of the rare examples of a literary orphan where his parents don't really all haunt him that much. It's his sister. I mean, Jessica was almost like a pseudo mother, wasn't she? She was the one who cared for him. She was the one who looked after him. Even before the parents died, she was the one who tried to engage with him. Like we said earlier, like Lockwood did a couple of odd jobs and things like that. He mentions this in The Creeping Shadow, by the way, that he had like a newspaper round. For anybody who's younger than 25, that was where 8-year-old boys would ride around the neighborhood on bicycles throwing newspapers at people's doors. There was a very fun Nintendo game based on that as well.
I had no idea that
Oh
existed.
my God. I think it was an arcade game first. Like, this is old. Like, this is older than me old.
I didn't really grow up with video games, but that's another story.
Oh,
So,
okay. Well, yeah, he had a newspaper round. I can't remember what else he said he did. He said he listed like 2 or 3 of them. When he's talking to Adelaide Whitman, Meg's giving me the weirdest look on the cameras.
I don't remember the other ones. I could look them up, but it's not that
Yeah.
important.
He says one of them is kicking women in the bottom, but
I don't think anybody paid him for
yeah,
that.
no, I think that's obviously just him being a little rat bag. But
Yep.
he's not. It's not like Lucy. Lucy was the breadwinner in the household, and she was expected to bring home the bacon. Whereas Lockwood was more of a kid. He was allowed to be a kid as much as his circumstances would let him be a kid. And Jessica would have been the reason that, he was allowed to do that, because Jessica took on most of the burden. And then she dies. And when she dies, that's all of his stability gone. He's 9 years old. He's got to feed himself, clothe himself. He's got to teach himself everything that he didn't know. And, he also owns this lovely house, which is great, mortgage-free, assuming mortgage-free. But also houses are expensive. Things break.
Very
You need
expensive.
water running into them. You have to have electricity.
You have to pay
He's got to
taxes.
find the money. Anyway, Jessica died. And with her death, she took Lockwood's childhood. That was the end of it. He turned 9. He had to survive. He went apprenticed himself to Sykes, who I think is probably just the only person who would take him. And then he throws himself into becoming Lockwood the agent, who becomes the person that we know. And his guilt at Jessica's death, and I guess losing her as well, it seems to mess him up quite a lot.
Understandably so. I mean, it's not his fault that she's died, but he feels like he should have saved her, and she's the closest family member he's had, and then she's gone, and he has nobody there to help him cope with it.
And I think that's one thing with, you get pushed into agency work, and as an agent, you are they do treat you like a professional person. And as a professional, nobody's going to sit down and stick their arm around you and go, are you feeling okay? No, you're expected to keep that under control, especially when you're doing agency work. You're fighting ghosts who are going to prey on your emotions. You have to keep all that under control. So he's just kind of left to it. Like I mentioned earlier, he goes patrolling and tooting. Like nowhere else in all 5 books and anywhere in the show do we hear about agents patrolling. So this child was walking around tooting at night. And why? Like,
What is
he's
he
just
doing?
looking for ghosts to stab or something, isn't he?
I know. He just wants to stab something. I've said that about Lockwood before, but it's, I think, especially true about Tiny
When
Lockwood.
we meet him as well, he's so distant. When you read The Apple Tree, obviously this is before anybody dies. He's very much just a normal 5-year-old boy. And 5-year-old boys, they like connection. They also like to show off. They like to, they like attention. When we meet him, he's very much, it's almost like he gave up on that. There was a case in France, I think, recently, where an 8-year-old was basically abandoned by their mother. The mother went off to go live with a boyfriend and basically paid the bills at home and left their kid, who was 6, actually, just to live by themselves. And nobody figured this out until the kid was 8 years old, because they would get themselves up and go to school and be entirely self-sufficient. But the discussion around this case kind of made me think, oh, this is, sort of what happened to Lockwood in a way, except it wasn't deliberate, it wasn't
Yeah.
negligence. Jessica couldn't help it. His parents couldn't help it. It just kind of happened.
Of course.
But it did make me go have a look into what happens to children who are forced to grow up so quickly. And so from the CPTSD, which is chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, that's what that stands for, isn't it? So this is,
Yes.
you've got PTSD, which I think most people are familiar with, which is when you've got one horrifically traumatic event that happened, or like a couple of them over a reasonably short period of time. Then you've got the chronic kind, which is trauma that's built up over time. So the CPTSD Foundation's website talks about the abandonment issues that you may be able to recognize in children who have been physically abandoned. And it's very Lockwood, all of them. So we're going to go through a little list of them here so that you can see kind of how Jessica dying really affected Lockwood and helped turn him into the boy that we know and love, as miserable as that is. Wow. I don't know. Could you imagine like cheery, happy Lockwood? Isn't that weird? I mean, he is cheery and happy.
He is remarkably cheery and happy considering everything that's happened to him. So, but yes, it is. It's difficult to imagine him without this experience of his past. So let's go through our list.
Okay, number 1, they fear giving too much in a relationship.
This is so Lockwood. And Lucy calls him out on it in The Hollow Boy for being very hot and cold with her. He is constantly pushing and pulling and drawing back and doesn't quite know how to kind of
What does
regulate
she say?
that.
Like, oh, there's a spark between them, there's a connection, but she doubts his ability to sustain that connection.
Exactly. She's like, something's there, but he can't kind of stick with it.
And 1 minute he wants his hands on her waist and is like correcting her form, and 1 minute it's like, actually, no, we're not really talking right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the boss. Number 2, they push people away to avoid rejection.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's kind of we just kind of explained that one too. He's afraid that Lucy's going to reject him first sometimes, so he pulls away.
We see that a lot in The Hollow Boy, isn't it?
Yes.
The Hollow Boy is really kind of like the poster child for all of Lockwood's abandonment issues, which is fun because it's also Lucy's self-esteem issues going on at the same time.
So much angst, so much drama.
And George being the pizza guy in the middle going like, this is fine, this is fine, this is fine.
Everything's burning down.
Number 3, I kind of looked at but yeah, a little bit, they're people pleasers.
I think there's elements where Lockwood is a bit of a people pleaser. He tries to keep everyone happy. And I mean, he has some ulterior motives for that. He wants his team to work well together. But I think he genuinely also, wants people to be happy. He wants them to like them, to like him.
He's like, if he hasn't decided that you're cooked, then he wants you to like him, doesn't he? He's very much... He's not like George or Lucy, who's like, listen, you're not one of my like 5 approved people, so you can go suck rocks for all I care. He's not like that. He's like, you're not on my list of people I hate. Tell me I'm pretty.
Lockwood wants everyone to love him.
The next one, okay, I'm always a little bit odd on this one because I don't really understand what the long word means in some ways. They experience codependency. I thought maybe you could talk about this a bit more.
Oh, well, thank you for spraying that on me. I mean, I think this one is a bit difficult to diagnose without being in Lockwood's head. But it is, when you rely too much on another person.
For your happiness?
For your own well-being. Yeah, beyond just your happiness, for your own well-being. And you're too overly involved in them and their emotions, and you make too much of your life about this person. And so I don't necessarily think that Lockwood is this way.
Yeah, I don't think that one hits him.
I think there is a situation where he could have become this way, but I don't think it's just not how his particular issues manifested.
But then when Lucy leaves, he kind of goes off the rails, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he is not very open with her, but he's also pretty dependent on her for his own stability. But I think it's more
Yeah.
than just that. I think Lucy leaving triggers a lot of things.
So that goes into the next one. The next one is they feel insecure in intimate relationships and friendships.
Yep. I mean, that's like Lockwood at the end, the entire Hollow Boy and beginning of The Creeping Shadow. He's just
I think
like,
even before that too, you can see, because it's like, yeah, he's friends with George, but he tries to keep up that front of he's the business leader and George is his employee. George is his deputy, but actually it's a business relationship. Like with Lucy as well, actually it's a business relationship. But they're friends. He
right,
cares about them
right.
personally. They're actual just friends. But he tries to keep it up, doesn't he? He doesn't want to kind of commit to that. You know, once you commit, then you're kind of like saying, I'm giving these people power to hurt me and leave me. And, you know, so he tries not
Yeah,
to. So the
exactly.
next one, I did not put numbers on these and I've forgotten how to count. Again, 4 hours sleep. If anybody knows what number we're up to, say it out loud now. 1, 2, 3, go. I couldn't hear you because this is pre-recorded. Meg!
6. 6.
Number 6.
Number
Okay,
6.
so number 6. I've lost my place. Number 6. They require repeated reassurances that they are loved.
Well, I mean, we talked a little bit about this already, but Lockwood really wants everyone to like him. He really wants to be famous. He really wants to be in the papers. He like loves that style profile at the end of The Empty Grave. Yes, I will take any opportunity I can to mention that.
Validate me, validate me, validate me. That's Lockwood, isn't it?
He's like, I want the people to love me.
And the next one, which feels almost, you know, contradictory, but isn't in the slightest. They feel the
Yeah.
need to control others.
Yeah, I think Lockwood is maybe not someone you would immediately point to as a control freak, but Lockwood has very, very strong urges for control and for things to be done his way if it's something he cares about. If he doesn't care about, whatever. But if he cares about something, he wants it done his way and he wants people behaving the way he thinks that they should behave.
Very much so. I've actually recently started rereading The Creeping Shadow, and something that sort of stuck out to me from his conversation with Lucy in her flat is, you know, he keeps saying, we've gone over this, I'll respect your choices, you're right, I need to respect your choices. And you think, what did she say to him? What did she, like, he was obviously trying to steamroll over her like he has for 3 whole books, really, you know? When did he ever stand up to Lockwood? Once, Coombe Carey Hall, when they both say,
Yeah.
no, we're absolutely not doing that. And what did they end up doing? They end up doing Coombe Carey Hall. They end up doing it Lockwood's way with a plan they know nothing about because Lockwood's controlling the whole thing.
We've been talking primarily about the books today, obviously, because the show didn't get to a lot of this, but you can even see this in the show.
The thing with Lockwood is that he's so charismatic. And also Lucy's the narrator. We see him mostly through Lucy's eye, and obviously Lucy fancies him. So she's got to give him a bit of extra grace. But that combined with charisma means that it doesn't come across as negative a trait as it actually is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, he knows that he's using his charm to his advantage, which makes him sound perhaps more manipulative than he actually is. But he definitely knows he's charming, charismatic, and he uses that sometimes to get what he wants.
We've got 2 more left on this list. This has turned into quite a long list. What are we on? Number 20? They jump from one relationship to another.
That one I think is debatable. Like there's the jokes in both the book and the show from Flo that Lockwood has all these girls in his past, but that seems highly unlikely in my opinion. And he does, you know, do a little bit of jumping from one person to the next, but that's honestly, and this is sad because mostly people keep dying on him. So he doesn't really have any other choice if he wants to have any relationships.
I mean, he does sort of like, I mean, I'm inferring a bit here, but obviously when Lucy joins, he starts paying her a lot more attention than he was paying George. And then when Holly joins, he starts paying Holly a lot more attention than he was paying Lucy. So there's a little bit of jumping there, but I don't think it really counts. Obviously, this is sort of looking at like adult survivors of childhood abandonment. So Lockwood's got about 8 years before he becomes a serial womanizer, according to this list. But again, 4 hours sleep, Meg, 4 hours sleep.
I mean,
the last one is They often will sabotage their relationships. Not so sure about that one either, but I think also Lockwood's got to maintain good working relationships with the people he's close to. So he's trying to pretend that he's not close to them while actually being close to them, and he can't really afford to sabotage the relationship with it. But he does kind of do a good job of that with Lucy, doesn't he? Once he realizes there's something there that's more than a business relationship, that's more than just platonic friendship, he's like, oh, yep, let's close the door on that, actually.
Well, and he doesn't sabotage his business relationships largely because he's so strategic. He knows. But then when it comes to emotional matters, that's maybe a different story. And he does have, moments where he gets really angry at Barnes and he's like, oh, and he's just like ready to throw him out. But he's not sabotaging that relationship in the same way.
So you said something nice there, like how he doesn't really do his business relationships bad because he's so strategic. That is one thing. Lockwood is so self-aware about this stuff that we do actually see him kind of start to work on it, right?
Yeah. I mean, and The Hollow Boy, as we've discussed a million times before, is a big turning point for him. That's the book where we first find out who Jessica is, to kind of tie it back to Jessica. And that's the book where Lucy finds out how she died, and we find out all of these things about her for the first time. And then at the end of that book, Lucy upends everything because she walks away and leaves.
It does kind of give him a bit of a kick in the ass to kind of like start working on his issues. I think The Hollow Boy is, we've talked about this before, I think it's a huge mess for everybody involved. This is Lockwood kind of at his peak, look at all my trauma. But at the same time, we've got Lucy playing the exact same game, and we're seeing it through Lucy's eyes, so it's not like she's particularly self-aware. And then the whole thing with the stairs, sorry, I mentioned this earlier in the outline, we just skipped over it, but I do want to say the stairs. There's this parallel there with Lucy screaming at the top of the stairs and him running up the stairs at Winter Garden to save her from the ghost. Now, when he tells Lucy what happened in Jessica's room, he hears Jessica scream from upstairs and he runs up the stairs to save her from the ghost, but he's too late.
It's a lovely parallel. Really well done, Jonathan Stroud.
Okay, and I'm just going to come in here and say, I'm really sorry, Mr. Stroud, but what the heck is going on with the continuity? Because what Lucy hears is not that at all when she touches the bed. But we will say that traumatic events sometimes like screw up your memories of those events. So maybe that's what's happened. What Lucy hears is Lockwood coming up to say, oh, Jessica, don't sulk at me. I know I was meant to help. I'm finding her dead. So he walks in quite nice and happily and just finds her dead.
But then he immediately goes into action fighting the ghost. So I think that's what sticks out.
The ghost is also trying to eat him. Because Lucy sees all this from the ghost's
yes,
point
immediately
of view.
Fight for his own life.
It's like, well done, Mr. Stroud. That is so messed up. That is a level of messed up I can only aspire to. Honestly, that's just fantastic choice. I love it.
It's very, very dark and creepy, but it's very well written. Great job again, Mr. Stroud.
But despite how absolutely messed up the whole thing was and how the Hollow Boy kicked up all these memories of Jessica for him, Lucy then leaves and Lockwood's self-awareness kind of lets him have a think about it. And while he's still saying, oh, you must have left because of Holly, it's because of Holly, it's because of Holly, his behavior's changed so much that he's gone over it. Even before then, he's kind of working on his issues. Like, it takes him 12 whole months to kind of accept that Lucy and George are going to be there for good. They're not leaving, so he might as well let them in. They're not going to, well, I guess they might up and die, but if they up and die, it's because he dragged them into a haunted house in it, so.
That's a hazard of the job, less of a personal
Exactly. So he lets him in the whole, like, death glow in the house thing. And then when Holly turns up, he's just much more confident, like growing closer to her more quickly. And he even says this. He says to Lucy, that's because of you. She says you're much less formal with her. It took you 6 whole months, queen of exaggerations, to stop calling me Miss Carlyle. And he said, that's because of you, because you've helped me open up. But it is true. He calls Holly very early on. He acts more familiar with her very early on, whereas with Lucy, he was calling her Lucy as soon as she told him to, but he still had that professional distance there for quite a long time. Holly, it's gone quite quickly, and he even shows her Jessica's room over the winter, which is only a couple of months in. And then Lucy just like disappears. She's up, gone. And Lucy leaving seems to make him realize that his emotional distance really is a problem, that this whole game he was playing, like, oh, we're friends, but we're not really friends, we're just business partners. Actually, I'm going to keep you at arm's length, but I'm going to let you in and show you my past, but actually I'm not going to do that. This whole back and forth thing he was doing, it's a problem. And he needs to confront his past. He needs to accept it. He needs to share it more, because Lucy is just such a nosy so-and-so. She's been sneaking into rooms and using her talents to try and figure out things that he hasn't told her. And I do kind of think that perhaps Lockwood's realised that, like, he feels a bit better when he talks about it as well.
I think he definitely has. I mean, and we get that great scene then in The Creeping Shadow where they are going through the things in Jessica's room, and he invites everyone in and he tells Lucy to go through a box. Insert Mairead screaming about that scene because it's one of her favorites. But that's just a great example of him physically confronting his own haunting. You know what I mean? He's confronting his baggage physically in that moment.
Yeah,
literally.
by TCS, he is definitely trying to put her ghost to rest, isn't he? He's kind of realised the influence that it's had over him, over his actions, over his decisions, over his relationships, and over the future that he's walking towards, and he's trying to sort it out.
Yeah, and I think we also can't forget to mention that in The Empty Grave, Jessica's death row also becomes such an important part of the plot because it's what ends up helping power that spirit gate at the end. And it's what helped save them all. Like, if it wouldn't have been for that, they wouldn't have had a way out when Portland Row was attacked. And we really see that Jessica's presence served this other purpose in the story.
That's not haunting the narrative, though. That's a direct effect.
I think it's still important, though, to talk about.
Oh, it's important. Yeah, it's important.
Yeah, I mean, her presence, like, because we talk about her death glow, she's literally haunting them. And at the end, her death glow disappears. It is the physical representation of the fact that Lockwood is no longer haunted by her in the way that he has been
one of the
previously.
final scenes in the books, they're in that room, the door is open, they're repainting all the walls,
Everything is bright. Everything is light. Like, it's a total difference. So that's Jessica, who we've talked about extensively now. And now that we've wrapped her up, we want to briefly discuss another haunting, and that is Lockwood's parents, Donald and Celia Lockwood.
So this is the one where we find out, oh, you look just like your father, but you've got your mother's eyes.
Yes, exactly. A Harry Potter quote right there.
Actually, does he? I think, no, he's got his mother's nature.
No, Harry has his mother's eyes. It's
no, I know. Thing. I'm thinking Lockwood.
Oh, but Lockwood.
Though. Yeah,
Lockwood.
Fitz actually says you look like your father, but you act like your mother.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the Lockwood quote. But you quoted Harry Potter first, Yep. Okay, so Donald and Celia Lockwood. So when we first meet Lockwood at Portland Row, we don't know exactly what the deal is with this house. It's a big mystery. It's expensive. It's old. It's in a nice area of London, and it's full of all these strange artifacts. But we don't know how Lockwood came to own this house. George seems to figure out that it belonged to his parents, but we don't know anything about them. And for a long time, we think in the first two books that they are the ones who are associated with the room that is locked. The room we later find out is Jessica's room, but it's not. So it's a nice little bait and switch there because they're still very important to the story, but they're not the ones who are truly haunting it to the extent that Jessica
becomes
is.
Very much a bait and switch, actually, because like I said, he wouldn't be an agent if Jessica hadn't have died. But actually, none of this would have happened if Donald and Celia hadn't given that talk at the Orpheus Society. So how far back are we going with that?
I mean, it's important, obviously, that Lockwood's parents die. And that obviously does have an impact on his life. We find out through the apple tree, that they were never around that much and he was always closer to Jessica. But obviously, they're still important. And the fact that they leave him Portland Row and they give him the resources associated with Portland Row gives him what he needs to build the agency. So that's kind of the basics of why they're important to this story.
I do like how his attitude towards his parents sort of mirrors his attitudes toward George and other skills as well. I'm sure that we mentioned it in our first Lockwood episode, which, by the way, listeners like a lot less than our episode about money, Which is fine. Lockwood likes money more than himself too. But we did mention then that he doesn't really see much value in the research side of things until later on in the series. And earlier on in the series, whenever he mentions his parents, it's like, oh yeah, they were into some silly research stuff. It was all just twaddle. It wasn't worth anything. They were idealistic. They, he doesn't assign any value to what they were doing. And then by the end of the series, it's not just Jessica's death glow that saves them. It's all of the stuff that his parents brought back. Everything was very significant. Everything was important. The spirit cloaks saved them in the Creeping Shadow time and time again. And the way he talks about them, the way he thinks of them, it shifts as he begins to realize who they were beyond the academic bookworms.
Right, and that the research had real consequences, and the research was capable of solving the problem. And we really see that actually get resolved at the end when he finally finds their lecture and he pieces everything together. And that lecture helps him solve the problem.
They've already solved it by that point. George has solved it independently.
Right, George has solved it, but we see that
they're solved it, yeah.
Right, yeah, that they could have solved the problem over a decade earlier.
They were missing a type 3.
They were missing Skull. We all were missing Skull.
Needed a Lucy.
It all comes back to Skull. But that knowledge and the growth that Lockwood goes through really helps him understand that his life has a purpose, that things aren't meaningless, that all these events, all this trauma he endured in his past, all these things came together and led him to where he is at the end of that book. And at the end of the series, which is a place where not only is he not haunted by his sister as much, he's not haunted as much by the legacy of his parents and by his guilt of being the only survivor of his family. And on that note, that is all we have to say for today, at least, about the Lockwood family and how they haunt the narrative in Lockwood Co. But that is not, of course, all we have to say about haunting the narrative, because we also think it manifests in a few other key ways in our beloved series. So, surprise, this is actually part 1 of a 2-part episode, and we will be back in 2 weeks to discuss how Lucy is haunted by characters in her past throughout the series. And so tune back in for that to listen to Natasha and I continue to dive into this great topic. In the meantime, you can follow us on all the places on social media. We love hearing from you, and we look forward to chatting more then.